Okay, welcome to GCP Online Meetup number 25. I'm your host, Jonathan Cham, and I have our buddy here, Anthony.
Almost forgot my name there.
I know, I did. I almost did. Yeah, Anthony just came back from another webinar you were doing. What were you working on?
Just the level 100 deploying apps to Google Cloud Platform.
Okay, we'll have to send a link.
Don't let me steal the spotlight. we have a special guest here today.
Yuri, what's going on, Yuri?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stackdriver is one of those products that not many people know about, right? Yeah. It's like, it's there. It does a lot of things behind the scenes, but many people don't even know about it.
Yeah, I agree. It's really an underrated and underutilized part of the platform. It's something that I'm particularly passionate about. I've spent most of my career before coming to Google working with monitoring, diagnostics, ITSM, and operations tools.
Yeah.
So I've kind of taken this on as a project for myself to let the world know that they should be using Stackdriver.
Yeah. One nifty fact that I didn't know about, when I started looking at Stackdriver was that it actually was built on Amazon first. It was built for, managing and monitoring AWS
That's right.
Environments, and the fact that now
it still does that.
Yeah, and it still does that, exactly. And the fact that we've acquired it makes it a really great use case for people who want to monitor multi-cloud environments and hybrid clouds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
And more than just monitoring, it's super versatile. I'm sure Yuri will.
Yeah,
I'm really excited.
I got to see a clip of it. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. All right, so Yuri, let's
expectations high.
Let's take a look at what you got today.
All right, let's switch over to the content. Cool, thank you. So again, thanks everyone for joining us. So here's the kind of the summary of everything I'm going to cover today. The bottom line is that Stackdriver is a fantastic monitoring and diagnostics platform for your services, regardless of whether you're running those services on GCP or AWS. One of the cool things about it is actually most of the functionality is free, that you don't even have to pay to use it, right? And we give you some fantastic resources to get started with it, right? Because really what we want to get you to a point is where you are actually picking up outages ahead of both engineering and the folks whose job it is to pick up outages, right? I'm going to apologize for the terrible puns and the rest of my animated GIFs and the rest of this.
We're all about puns and memes and bad jokes.
So, why should you care? Why do you want to monitor? Why monitor with Stackdriver? Well, a lot of people have problems with their monitoring tools, right? So if you have a problem with your tool, you're now having to solve that problem before you can solve your actual problem. Some of you may be familiar with the old joke about regular expressions. I had a problem, so I thought I'd use a regular expression to solve it, but then I would have two problems.
Yeah, regex is definitely a problem.
Right, there you go. So monitoring can be just like that. Like, I have a problem, I'm going to try to deploy or maybe write some monitoring to solve it. Well, now you're going to have two problems, right? So Stackdriver is what's going to prevent that from happening. So, right, what do people do today? One, they write monitoring themselves. So here's my impression of someone whose job it is to write applications and services trying to write monitoring. That could be a problem, right? Another problem is you've already got tools. You have a whole bunch of tools to do a whole bunch of different things, and now you're trying to figure out, if you're on call, what am I looking at? How do I make sense of all this information? Like, what is actually important and what's not? And obviously, if the tool has a problem, then you have no idea what's going on. You can't really see anything at all. If you've got a tool that's deployed on premise, if you got a tool that someone else is running for you, all these things can be unreliable, right? So our goal here is to give you a reliable platform that you can do your monitoring, right? So Stackdriver is a solution, right? It's really easy to use. It works basically out of the box. And if you want to extend it, if you want to do more with it, it's really easy to do so. And it's basically built into GCP. So if your services are on GCP, a lot of that monitoring is already built in. You might actually already be using some of the monitoring. And in the demo, I'll show you some things that you may already be using without even being aware of it. Like I said before, it's also mostly free. There's a free tier of Stackdriver, and there's a premium tier. And pretty much everything I'm going to show you today is actually part of the free tier.
Nice.
You don't even need to really spend money to get better monitoring, to get better performance out of your services, rather than just throwing more infrastructure at it and hoping that more containers or that a bigger cluster will solve the problem. And it actually does work as advertised. It's really great. I've used a lot of these tools in my career, and Stackdriver is fantastic. It works as advertised. It covers a lot, and it really does work.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to customers for almost 10, 15 years, and if there's one thing they like, it's free.
Yeah, there you go. And yeah, if there's one thing I like is that it's giving people what they like.
Yeah. I mean, all jokes aside, a lot of this is also integrated, right? I think in the past I had to install monitoring systems for clients as a consultant, and I mean, there's a lot of work involved installing agents, configuring the, all the config files, and then troubleshooting it if it doesn't send. It's just a lot of work, and the fact that it's integrated into a lot of our systems like Kubernetes, App Engine, Compute Engine, even our Cloud ML products, just makes it really easy to say, okay, something went wrong. All right, go to Stackdriver, and you didn't have to set up a thing.
Yeah, and a lot of times you don't even have to think about going to Stackdriver. We're actually, we're continuing to integrate the Stackdriver functionality into the Cloud Console. So a lot of this stuff is available just in the main console without you even having to know where Stackdriver is.
So if I'm looking at, let's say, I'm training a data set or something like that in Cloud ML Engine, and I go to Google Cloud Logging. Is that Stackdriver?
It actually is. Yeah, all of the logging that is generated in our various both infrastructure platforms as well as the managed services. All of that logging is done by, with, and to Stackdriver.
Okay.
And then there's other cool things you can do with that logging once we're creating it. You can do things like create metrics out of it, which I'll show you. You can dump the logs to other data sources. So you can, for example, publish logs to PubSub. You can publish logs to BigQuery and do analytics on them there.
That's pretty cool.
So because Stackdriver is integrated in the rest of the platform, there's a lot of value to be had there.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking a lot of good things about Stackdriver, and part of this, this meetup is really talking about kind of the limitations of Stackdriver. I know. So we have customers. I mean, you can think about the company size of Netflix, right? They have very complex applications, and maybe they have very specific monitoring needs. And maybe that's when they start maybe using a lot of the open source tools to build their own monitoring tools. But I would say at least maybe 70–80% of my customers are just using the out-of-box Stackdriver, and it provides a lot of value.
Yeah, I mean, one limitation we should be very upfront about is the fact that Stackdriver is only for cloud services, right?
Exactly.
So it will not monitor your on-premise deployment. If you have an on-premise deployment, you've probably had it for a long time. And you probably have a lot of tools around it already. So that's a space that we are looking to extend Stackdriver into. But that is, if you're going to ask about limitations, that is absolutely kind of the first and biggest one today, is that it really is for AWS and GCP, not for stuff you got on-premise.
Good point.
All right. So let's take a look, right? I've spent a bunch of time telling you how great it is. Right?
Let's see
I should
if
probably
it works.
back it up. Let's see if
let's
see if we can actually get to work. And because I am incredibly courageous, I'm actually going to do this live.
Not pre-recorded. This is all live.
Yeah, we're going to do a live demo, which on a, I think there's a very well-known theorem that says the larger your audience, the less likely your live demo is going to work. So let's see what happens. This will be fun for everyone involved. So I'm going to start out in, I'm actually going to switch this to full screen. Hopefully that'll be a little easier to see. I'm starting out in the Google Cloud Console. You're all probably familiar with this. So let's take a look at Stackdriver. The easiest place for me to get that is to go to the, I think it's still called the hamburger menu. If I scroll down to monitoring, it'll actually take me to my Stackdriver screen with the project from which I initiated Stackdriver, pre-selected, pre-populated, or it's telling me in my Stackdriver demo account. So one thing I should clarify here is the concept of accounts, right? Because in GCP, we really don't have that idea. Accounts are used for things like service accounts. An account in Stackdriver is an entity that is a logical collection of things you are monitoring. Typically means you have multiple GCP projects being monitored by a single Stackdriver account, right? So there's not a one-to-one correlation between GCP projects and Stackdriver accounts, right? Accounts in Stackdriver can monitor multiple GCP projects, and you'll see that here I can select, all the different Stackdriver accounts and then the GCP projects that they are primarily monitoring, right? But I'm going to look at my demo project, and obviously when I'm talking about monitoring, the first thing I want to know is there anything wrong? And the thing that tells me if there's anything wrong is the incidents pane. So I see I've got a couple here. I've got a couple of incidents open. So let's take a look at the open incident. Now, this one has been open since, looks like May 12th. So clearly no one's paying attention to monitoring, which is a bad
Where's
thing.
the ops team here?
That's right. But what this will tell me is a few different things. The first thing it'll tell me is what is the actual problem? And you can see over here, it'll say, what's the condition? In this case, there's a metric threshold violation. And what's actually telling me is that in this case, 200 responses, which is actually a good thing, have exceeded a specific threshold, right? So basically it's telling me that there's a bit more traffic than I expected, right? Good to know. What else do I know? I know what this particular metric looks like most recently. So I can see it's been mostly flat, but yeah, I'm seeing some increase, right? So there's more stuff happening than there was before. That's also good to know. And it's also going to tell me what is the actual thing that is causing the violation. I can click on that resource. And obviously, like I said before, anytime you do a live demo, things go awry. So let's go back to our incidents and we'll try to.
And incidents and alerts, can you talk about the differences between the two?
Yeah, great question. So alerts are basically the actual notifications. Right. So if an email is sent, if an SMS is sent, if a message is published to PubSub, if we send something over to PagerDuty, that is an alert. Right. An incident is a thing that would trigger an alert. Right. So an incident would be a violation of a threshold metric, or something like that, like something where we're saying we expect things to be or act a certain way, and now they're not. Okay, that's an incident. An incident may or may not have alerting policies associated with it. So if an alerting policy is triggered, an alert is generated, then I get the notification. Make sense?
Yep.
And is there a pretty big, I guess, range of metrics that you're able to kind of configure these alerts and incidents upon? Like I imagine you'd probably want to see like 500 responses or something like that.
Yeah, great question. So essentially any metric that Stackdriver collects can be configured for alerting, right? So as long as it's a metric that we're tracking, you can alert on it. Which will take me to, like what are the metrics and then how do you collect them? Well, let's take a look. I'm actually going to look at a resolved incident. So I'm going to say, okay, here's a test that was actually, again, kind of similar kind of thing, right? A metric was violated, but in this case, we're actually pushing the alert to PubSub, not as an email, right? So a different kind of alerting is available. And then now, hopefully, if I look at the resource that is actual alerting, I'll get the dashboard to show up. And for this particular resource, it'll show me some of the metrics that we're collecting, right? So we're collecting, in this case, this is actually an App Engine service. So we're collecting information about the HTTP traffic. We're collecting information about the actual system. So things like how many instances there are, how much CPU we're using, how much memory we're using. We're also collecting information, because it's App Engine, about data store activity, as well as Memcache activity. Right. So these are all the things that are basically, as long as you're using App Engine, this is just kind of there out of the box. You don't have to tell it, collect these metrics. And similar if you're using other services, and all of these metrics are kind of there by default. And again, for all of them, I can create alerts. Right. But for this particular incident, we want to see what's actually going on. So we can see that this is a service that is running multiple versions. Right. And for any one of these versions, I can actually go and look at the logs. So now this is probably going to look somewhat familiar to some of you. Now I'm back in the GCP console. I'm looking at logging. It's looking at the logs for, it kind of pre-creates the filter. What I can do is say, forget that. If I just want to show you what does logging look like in general. So I can say, here's all the different logs that are kind of being created. And I'm just going to say all logs. And for my in this case, my App Engine app, I want to look for all my modules, and they kind of will generate a whole lot of logs, right? So you can see for any one of these, I can drill down and say, okay, here's my load generation actually doing work on this application. Right. Now, one of the cool things I can do is I can say, well, let's search. I want to, for example, I care about a particular message that may be in my log. So in this case, there's this thing called fuzzer that's in this application. I don't know how often it's actually being executed, or how often is this thing happening. Once I found it, what I can then do is create a metric from logs. And when I do that, it'll basically capture the number of times this particular message appears, and then it'll track that as a time series metric. And then I can do charting on it. I can do alerting on it. I can use it as a basis for alerting policies for incidents. So I can basically add metrics in this example from logs.
So, right? I mean, one of the great things about Stackdriver, obviously, it's collecting everything, and it tells you everything. But at some point, I mean, it's probably collecting too much, right? What are some strategies to reduce the amount of information you need from the logs? I know there's some export capabilities, and just kind of how do you clean up all this data?
So I'll say this, unlike most tools, you don't have to really worry about cleaning up logs, right? that's the advantage of kind of being in the cloud and having a managed service, which Stackdriver fundamentally is. It's a managed monitoring service. We take care of the cleanup for you. Have the logs be generated. You can run analysis on them. The one time you might want to send them somewhere else to do what's called create a sink is if you want to do more advanced analytics on them. So that's where you might want to, for example, push them to BigQuery or push them to cloud storage, where you might want to do additional processing on them. But as far as like cleaning them up in the source, there's no need to do that. Which does make life a lot easier as compared to like more traditional tools.
I think earlier you mentioned that you can also configure PubSub as a sink.
Absolutely.
I've heard of PubSub. I think I know what it is, but I think there's a cool use case if I'm correct. So what can you give us like a high level overview of PubSub?
Yeah, I can certainly try. And Jonathan might actually do a better job of that than I will, but I'll try. So you keep me honest here. PubSub is our global messaging service, right? So the idea is that you can create a topic, and then you create basically things that can publish to that topic, and then subscriptions to that topic. So if you're familiar with Kafka, for example, this is kind of like a global version of Kafka without any of the limitations.
Fully managed too.
Fully managed service, fully global. So you don't have to worry about managing instances or clusters or the networking. It's literally fully global. I can publish a message in Europe and subscribe to it in North America, all that sort of thing. And there's things like guaranteed exactly once delivery and all that sort of thing. And what people typically use PubSub for is like ingest as the first layer for ingesting data. So if you think about a very traditional event-driven data pipeline, you'd have an ingestion layer, a processing layer, then a storage layer. So PubSub is that first ingestion layer. From PubSub, you may be pulling things into, for example, Dataflow to do streaming processing, and then output that data to BigQuery. You would use Dataflow if you need to do some transformation on that data. So if you're, one of the things you can actually do is you can create logs to Stackdriver in your code. So let me show you what that looks like, because I think that's kind of very relevant to what we're talking about.
That's really funny because someone, Neeraj, was asking, can you push custom logs to Stackdriver? And perfect timing, Neeraj.
I wasn't even looking at the chat. So let me show you how that's done. The functionality I'm going to do that is called debugging, and this is at the start I said I might show you some things that you've probably seen before, and I imagine that lots of people that have used GCP have seen logs before. They know Stackdriver does logging. I mean, Anthony, you were very familiar with it. But debugging is one of those things that I think a lot of people have not seen. What debugging allows me to do is if my code is managed in a repository in GCP, I can actually go to my code and I can add within my code, I can add snapshots. So I can go down here and I can say, I want to capture the state of my code at this point. So if I load this particular page and go back to debugging, it'll capture my call stack and the state of my variables at each step of that call stack.
Nice.
And I can do this in production without having to modify my code, without having to add instrumentation or anything like that. The only thing I need to do is, and I'm not sure if we actually have this in this particular code line, I think it might be somewhere above, is there's literally a single line of code that you put in at the start of your file that will basically include our instrumentation library. But I can do this in production without bringing down my app. But how does this, what about logs, right? What I can actually do is add not just a snapshot, but I can add what's called a log point. And the log point will say, where in my code do I want to put? And I want to do a log point, let's say at the same step. And I'll create, what kind of log do I want to do? And what is the condition that would trigger that particular log? So I say maybe pick is greater than 0 in this case. Pick is greater than 0. And I can actually dynamically add logging to my application for 24 hours, right? And whatever logging gets generated using my log point will show up in Stackdriver logs. And then, like I said before, you can put it anywhere you want. You can generate metrics off that. Essentially, it becomes just another Stackdriver log, which is, I think that's really cool. And the fact that you can do that again in an application that is running in production without impacting any users, without bringing your system down, without restarting. Honestly, I got to say, I've never seen anyone else be able to do this.
Yeah, one of the themes I'm seeing, and I'm obviously not tied in directly with the product side, but looks like they're really focusing on how do you use a single interface to control everything about your application. So let's say, I mean, with, we have our, Cloud Shell, right? You can basically run anything you want, connect to a VM, connect to all your workloads through Cloud Shell. All you need is a browser. You don't need a desktop. You don't need, you don't need a computer really. You just go on Chrome and open up a web browser. So, I mean, same here, right? It looks like you can troubleshoot code. You can insert, stop points into your code, and everything is done through the browser. I think they're trying to streamline everything here.
Yeah, that's exactly correct, right? We want to give you kind of a single place to monitor everything you're doing, to alert you if there's any issues, to give you, tools to resolve issues. Hopefully, if you're running in GCP, you can be as self-sufficient as possible.
Yeah.
So I want to show you one more thing. I know we're kind of running towards the end of time. I'm going to show you one more thing about Stackdriver, and I'd love to answer any additional questions that you might have. So this is another thing that I think most people probably have not seen in Stackdriver, and this is this concept of tracing. So what tracing is basically a way to measure latency in your services. And what it basically does is it looks at all the executions of your code, and it looks like where's the latency coming from. So again, we're still looking at that same App Engine application. And I can see that when I look at it, it's telling me, hey, there's some memcache calls that are slow. I can click on that. It'll show me all of the memcache gets. So in this case, it was 209 milliseconds. And again, I can see when it took place, how long it took. And again, I can go right to the logs and I'll actually pull up the logs for that specific execution, which is really cool. So after doing more search, you can see up here, it pre-creates the filter. And then I'll actually give me some information about, in this case, what might have been happening that could cause this particular latency. And it's saying, this request caused a new process to be started, and it caused the application to be reloaded, right? So this is a very fast and easy way for me to measure latency in my application, to identify, bottlenecks, things may be slowing down, and very quickly take action on them as well. So those are really the three main things I wanted to highlight for you all. I wanted to show you kind of basic monitoring, logging. I want to show you debugging and how you can get into your code as it's running. And then finally, I want to show you tracing and how you can go about measuring latency in your services.
Oh, that's really interesting. So we have another question about how does Stackdriver and application monitoring, maybe infrastructure monitoring, how do those all tie together? Because I know sometimes the lines are blurred, but it seems like some products say that they do everything, even though they're not good at. I mean, you can be good. You can't be good at everything. Right? There's just nothing out there that's good at everything. Right. So if you were to say, what is Stackdriver good at? Like, is it infrastructure? Is it application? Is it in between?
So, application monitoring, specifically application performance monitoring, has a very specific meaning when you talk about monitoring, right? And while Stackdriver does do, debugging and tracing, and that allows you to look at, latency in your services, and allow you to look at your code as it's executing, it is not an APM tool. Right. If you're someone who's familiar with New Relic or App Dynamics, or some of the even the new offering within Datadog, like Stackdriver is not looking to replace those, and it does not replace those today. So where its real strength is today, I think, is the fact that it's built into the GCP platform, and all of the monitoring for your GCP services is there out of the box, including some of the cool things you saw with logging. So it's a very low effort and almost zero cost way to get a lot more visibility into what you're doing in GCP, without the need to go and purchase a third-party solution and do additional deployments and instrumentation. So its real strength is going to be in monitoring your GCP and AWS infrastructure, your GCP managed services, give you a real kind of easy zero maintenance way to do logging and log analysis, especially once you start using some of the more advanced analytics techniques with logs. And again, do that for basically free and without a whole lot of effort.
And on a related topic, Martin was asking about how do you use Stackdriver GCP interface with AWS? So I mean, obviously with GCP, everything's tied in naturally. You log in and you're getting logs and monitoring. What's the process with AWS? I'm guessing you probably do some agent or something like that.
That's exactly correct. You would deploy a Stackdriver agent to your AWS image, to the VM. There's a bit of configuration involved from there, but then basically once the monitoring starts in Stackdriver, it looks like just like any other monitored resource. You would see your. I'm not sure if I can look at my project now. I'll see if I don't actually know if I have any AWS instances. Oh yeah, here we go. I have. Looks like I have some well, at least S3 is in here.
Yeah.
So you can see there's some information from AWS being pulled in, but the bottom line is that it looks like it's just another thing to be monitored. You know, we're not really treating it as a second-class citizen in any way, right? Our objective is to treat all monitored resources exactly the same, no matter where they're running. And then, you know, at some point when we add on-premise monitoring, it'll look the same, right? We want to give you a single tool to monitor everything regardless of where it's running.
And then, Anthony, since you're the Kubernetes expert, there's a question about, does it show the load on the pod with Stackdriver? I mean, we collect a lot of information within GKE. I'm trying to think, load on the pod actually might just be through that GUI that comes along with.
Yeah, so there is an open source dashboard that Kubernetes comes with. My understanding is that so it captures infrastructure metrics from nodes that are within a Kubernetes cluster. I believe that there's a fluentd daemon set that runs on every node that gives back infrastructure metrics. But if you're looking at like actual kind of state of objects in Kubernetes, I'm not sure I've seen that in Stackdriver.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if it's on the roadmap, as I'm sure many people are asking for.
It's very much a roadmap item. So Stackdriver will be extended to fully cover GKE.
Right.
That's a kind of I think in the top 3 items that are being worked on right now.
I do know that there are ways to collect those type of resources in the meantime. There's something called kube state metrics. So I did encourage, I didn't catch the name, but to check that out in the meantime until Stackdriver does support it. But again, I think that you know, Kubernetes is a first-class citizen here, and I don't think that is you know, Stackdriver integration is an exception. So
yeah, I think right now Kubernetes, I mean, it was built with its own monitoring tool, right? Self-sufficient monitoring tool, you know, using fluentd. But I think the integration with Stackdriver has yet to be completed.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Okay,
I think that's exactly.
Okay, perfect.
But you're still getting infrastructure metrics.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
On the nodes within your cluster.
Right.
The cluster is very much
not to dilute the value of Stackdriver.
Yes, of course, the value is still there. That's still important.
Yeah, we're just trying to be, you know, as
transparent.
Yeah, exactly.
I appreciate that.
Prasanna has a question. Trying to fetch metrics. Man, everyone's talking about GKE.
So
trying to fetch metrics from GKE cluster using Google Cloud Monitoring Python client library. Is there a way to pull the information Stackdriver and send it to Kibana? So I think the question is,
excellent question. Okay, so the real question is, you know, information is a Stackdriver. How do you get it out?
Exactly.
So I talked about a couple of options there. It depends where your Kibana stack is running. Something that I can think of off the top of my head would be, you know, for example, publishing it to PubSub and then maybe writing a simple data flow pipeline to grab it out of PubSub and dump into Kibana. Another way would be to publish it, just to dump it to cloud storage, and then have write something else. They'll pick it up from storage and put it into Kibana. But those are your kind of your basic options.
So are those what are the options leaving Stackdriver? I think there was Google Cloud Storage.
Cloud storage, PubSub and BigQuery are the top, the big
ones. Okay.
The one that I think 99% of the people end up using.
Yeah. So Prasanna, yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. It really depends on what you need. It seems like PubSub's the most common sense way to do it.
If you want to get it out of GCP, your 2 easy options are PubSub and cloud storage.
Cloud storage. Okay. Cool. Great. Well, that was a lot of questions about Stackdriver. I didn't expect it, especially a lot more about GKE. Happy. Maybe we need to focus our next one, the upcoming one, on GKE and Stackdriver. I think that's going to be a good one.
That would be fantastic. We have to wait. We actually just have to wait for the functionality to be delivered.
All right. Yeah.
But as soon as it's available, I would love to do a session on that. Yeah.
We'll be calling
and I think the audience will be there. I think GKE is obviously hugely successful.
Exactly.
And anything we can do to make it easier for people to use will be helpful.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Yuri, so much for your time, and thank you for joining. We're super excited to have you, and I think Anthony is hosting the next GCP Online Meetup while I'm little bit of out of commission for a month. But anyway, thank you. Baby bonding to do. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great week.
All right, thanks, folks.